Welcome back to Where's a Teaspoon? Today we're joined by our Chief Operating Officer, Dean Wallace, for a conversation that goes beyond the job title and delves into some of the experiences that shape who we are. So thank you for joining us, Dean.
No problem.
Can you start off and just tell us a bit about yourself? Maybe tell us about your upbringing and what you were like as a child.
So I've always lived around sort of the Chesterfield area of Derbyshire. So I've always lived mainly near a place called Staveley. People know Chesterfield, I'm sure you know it, which is like a old sort of mining, small. It's called a town, but it's not very big. And brought up my brother, who was younger than me, mum and dad. Dad worked at Staveley Chemicals, worked there for 36 years. Always said never had a day off, apart from had to have a knee operation when he had 5 days off work, and that was sort of like, I always remember that memory and conversation. And my mum mainly looked after myself, my brother, and her parents, so my grandparents, and did some like caretaking in school, dinner ladying, as they call it at the time, across the school, which were across the road from where we were brought up. And yeah, me as a child, I mainly sort of quite shy, sort of self-conscious, really into sports and football and that sort of stuff. And I had a really good childhood at home, but I really struggled with school, and particularly went to secondary school. I had a real bad time in terms of being bullied, and for the last few years of school, my attendance wasn't great, so lots of things happening. And I can always remember sort of coming out of school that I think the assumption was that I wouldn't really make anything for myself, and I'd be destined for sort of potentially life working in a factory or doing something like that. And I can always remember them sort of conversations and some of how that made me feel at the time. And I had a bit of an attitude after that around wanting to prove people wrong. And I guess so I had a really good childhood, but I had some quite difficult times growing up as part of that, and my family was a big part in me sort of getting through it all as well, really.
So it was school that was mainly the issue for you. Was there a lot of truancy from what you were saying there? Did you play truant to get out of that unhappy environment?
No, I didn't really play truant. My mum my mum helped me stay off school. My dad was quite old-fashioned in some of his views and really wanted me to go to school. so that used to cause a few tensions. But yeah, it got really difficult, and for a time I was able to sort of get some support to be partly homeschooled, and I managed to get, I think, 4 GCSEs at a C or above, and I just couldn't get maths, and so I did my maths GCSE again when I was 18, and I managed to get a B, which allowed me then to get into university, which was never really on the cards ever in terms of me being able to go to university. I managed to do that, so I went to college and did stuff obviously between sort of 16 and 19 that allowed me to do that ultimately.
Yeah. You mentioned there were comments and the general vibe was that people didn't think you would amount to anything. How did that affect you as a kid? How did that make you feel?
Yeah. I guess it fed into my lack of confidence that I already had, my low self-esteem, and just sort of being down on myself. And I think for a time, I really struggled being able to talk to people I didn't know. So I could talk to my mum, talk to my dad, my brother, sort of the friends we had around where we lived. But I really struggled being able to communicate, and it really played into that shyness and that introverted sort of natural nature that I've probably got, and that I still sometimes, I guess I'm more introverted, but I guess over time I've been able to manage that differently, and I suppose it wasn't easy, but I'm sure lots of people have difficulty growing up. Growing up can be difficult, but I had a really good. I had some things that people don't necessarily always have around them in terms of really supportive parents. And I guess coming through all that probably made me a better person, stronger person in different ways as I grew up than what might have been otherwise.
Sounds like you had some good foundations there set you up with your home life. I believe there was a moment, though, in your teens that turned things around for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, and yeah, right. And this could be a bit. This might be a bit embarrassing now. We're in 2026 talking about this. So I can always remember in 1994. So it was my 14th birthday, and on ITV was Rocky 4, and we taped Rocky 4. So we were going out for a meal for my birthday, and the next day, which I think was a Sunday, it fell on. I watched that film. And it's from that film that I guess got more dedicated towards sports and training, and I guess in those films I got into all the Rocky films and all that sort of stuff. It's all around sort of not giving up, being resilient, taking the blows, and keep going the distance, that sort of stuff. And so, as trite as it might sound, that really played a big sort of part in I guess how I started to change and approach things differently. I guess that sort of stuff around the, for lack of a better word, sort of role model and something like that to aspire to. That's not, I guess, at that age, that's not like your parents or people, something bigger than or felt bigger than you and that. And yeah.
Was it, so you watched the film and then did something like click instantly, or was it a gradual process that your perspective started to shift?
Well, yeah, I guess it was gradual. You sort of take certain themes from it, and then I wanted to watch the other films, and I guess they reinforced the same themes. And I was never interested in reading. I wanted to read about those films and that sort of stuff, which then got more interested in them reading. And then from there, you start to think, oh, well, that's quite motivational. So you start taking more interest in doing things. I guess being interested in sports and activity, did quite a lot of different martial arts, ultimately in my later teens, and football and that sort of stuff. I suppose it then becomes almost like a positive cycle of sort of reinforcement, and you start to meet different people, and over time, and you start to then, I suppose, create different friendship networks, become a bit more confident in yourself, start to, you start to look, I suppose, and feel different. But that's not, I suppose, a straight line of everything sort of suddenly turning rosy and being better. It's where you gradually sort of dig yourself out from how you're feeling. And sometimes things get worse and sometimes things get better. And I guess it's one step forward, one step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And over time, things I suppose, fall in place a bit more and start to change. And also I was able to access some support as well during that time in terms of like, I suppose now it'd be similar to behavioural therapy, some psychology support. So it weren't just that, it was a matter of watching, just I guess watching films and stuff changing, but they were sort of something I could always relate back to and always think back to that time.
And then sport and physical activity clearly became even more important to you. You went on to study sports science at uni. Did you have a career plan at that stage? What was on your mind?
No, I've never had a career plan. I did for a while work in a factory, and I thought I don't really want to do that for another 40 or 50 years. And I sort of did a few different things in that first year out of school when I was really struggling. And then I went to college, and I always remember a conversation with my dad where my dad said, just do something you enjoy. And I enjoyed doing sport. So I went to college and did like I think it was a BTEC sports science qualification, and then did about 4 or 5 different NVQs, either related to sports nutrition or physical activity or anatomy and physiology. And then I achieved all that. And I then went to Sheffield Hallam University, did a sports science degree just because I liked sport. And at the same time, I was working at Kilmarsh Sports Centre. So I was just like a leisure attendant, sport attendant, and then did some coaching, mainly coaching football and some fitness classes. And so I think I probably always wanted to do a job where I never had to wear a shirt and be sat behind a desk. But then I guess that didn't really quite pan out, because as you start to then, I suppose, develop and you look at other opportunities, you realise that actually to progress in terms of, if you want to have a career, you end up doing things that potentially take you away from doing some of that stuff. If you want to, I guess, be able to work more broadly at that time in sport development. And I was really interested in sort of sports pathways for children and young people. I did some work for a while for North East Derbyshire District Council in Clay Cross, which were around working with children who had multiple, I guess, disadvantage would be the terminology you use in 2026, weren't so much the terminology then, more around just social exclusion and using sports as partly diversion activity, but also as part of a route to get younger people to engage with education or work or employment opportunities, and did that sort of stuff. And from there, I just really fell into a series of roles that sat between either local government and NHS that were around physical activity, men's health, that sort of stuff, really the obesity stuff when it came in under Labour government in the mid 2000s. Opened some doors into some NHS jobs, and then someone eventually said to me, "Do you want to work in public health?" I didn't know what that were at the time, and things sort of went from there. But I've never really had a career plan. Never thought I'd do the job I'm doing now, and never thought I'd end up in a bunch of jobs that I've been leading up to this one, if I'm honest.
Yeah, you've from what you've said so far, it sounds like quite a typical working class upbringing. So when you look at yourself now and see yourself in this kind of leadership role, like how does that make you feel?
That's a good question. Sometimes, so I do see myself as working class, but then I'm also conscious that as people who don't know me might look at me, they might not see me as such, because I always remember when I would just starting work and working in different roles, particularly in the late 90s, early mid 2000s. I look at people in terms of the execs. I didn't really know what executives probably really meant at that point in time. I know they're a chief executive, but you sort of look at, I think when people almost sometimes think of them as sort of mystical beings, and they're them, and not us. And so sometimes I'm always really conscious, and maybe it's comes out sometimes as a bit of a working class chip on my shoulder, that I'm not seen as someone who's distant or not part of the whole, if you know what I mean, because everybody's got a job to do. It doesn't matter what job you're doing. If one person doesn't do their job, then other things fall over, don't they? Like if a cleaner's not good at cleaning, then infection prevention control doesn't go well, and then people become more ill. And you can have the best surgeon in the world doing an operation, but if that person's going to go back to an unclean ward, there's a chance that individual gets some sort of infection and potentially have severe consequences as a result of it. And so you're only as good as the strength of the whole team. And I guess that's what I believe. But I also recognise, particularly in what feels like quite a fragmented and bit of a volatile world that we seem to be in now, that things don't feel probably the same as what they used to do in terms of people doing some of those jobs, and sometimes people can get quite fraught in that, and I'm really mindful of that, and how we support people to do the best they can in whatever role they're doing is really important. And so I suppose I'm always quite conscious of the title I wear as opposed to I guess the person I am, because I'm Dean, who's a husband, father, son, brother, all that stuff. I'm also chief operating officer for DCHS, but tomorrow something could happen to me. I might not be the COO for DCHS, but the next day someone might be, someone will be, and that title will carry on. So it's almost like there's a job role, isn't there? And as much as we value people, jobs are jobs, and everybody at some point will leave a job and someone else will fill that void. And there's only one me, like there's only one you, or one of anyone, but there are other people who will be chief operating officer, just like before I directed public health for Derbyshire, now someone else does that role. So I also think it's something around bearing in mind that there's a person behind every single job, whatever it is, whether that's a nurse, doctor, cleaner, receptionist.
Yeah. There's a lot more to us all than our roles and our job titles. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and that's the bit where what's not replaceable, is it? That's the bit where no one else can be another father to my children. No one else can be another son that I'm to my mum now. Or do you know what I mean? It's that sort of stuff, I think, in terms of perspective.
Yeah, your priorities. Yeah. You've been described as being passionate about men's health. What is it about that subject that speaks to you personally, and how does that passion influence your life today?
Well, that sort of stems back to my first, I guess, NHS role. So when we're talking about my career, I sort of had this trajectory where I did the sports side, then I got into the health side, and then I got into public health and managed to work my way up through all those different structures. And one of the early jobs I was working on a men's health program around ex-coal mining communities. So we used to go out to miners' welfares, working men's clubs, to try and speak with men about their health issues, do blood pressure checks. There used to be a community nurse who would come out to some of these events. We used to do some exercise sessions and try and get people more engaged in their health, and sometimes sign up to do like an 8-week, I guess, health and wellbeing course, and then some support after that. And what I didn't realise, which I'm sort of aware of much more now, is that like men access health services much less than women.
Yeah.
National strategies tend to be more focused on women's health, but very often through reproductive sort of lens. Sometimes we see some of that in terms of women's health strategy and things like that. But then men, in terms of inequality, we don't really focus on them as an inequality group. So men are much more likely to commit suicide than women. So roughly in terms of the suicide rate, for out of every 4 suicides, 3 of those will be a male. Men more likely to die younger than women, and also suffer multiple ill health issues at a younger age. They're also more likely to engage in sort of risky health behaviours that then impact sort of the health and well-being. So I guess it's from that perspective that I originally had an interest in. Through my work in public health, it's just something that I guess has always stuck with me in terms of how do we ensure we deliver fair and equitable health services for all. And I think in that we very often don't focus sometimes on gender, sometimes as one of the groups in which we need to target, and particularly from a public health perspective, that's quite important. And probably more important now also, regardless for men and women, that lots of our health services are delivered at times when people are at work. And I think when you look into the 80s and 90s, that it was more a typical situation where the man would go out to work, and mainly that their partner would be sort of more likely to be working at home or working part-time. And so in that point in time, there was an issue that was more around men's access to health services. I think now we've probably got more of an issue of just general access to some of the health services. So if you can get an appointment, say, for example, with a GP, then it's more likely to be between, say, 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. and maybe 5 or 6 p.m. Now, for the majority of people, whether you're male or female, that's not always the most ideal time, particularly for planned sort of appointments, that you will want to access that because of time off work, employment, etc. I guess now with Teams, there's potentially more flexibility around some of that, but there's also something around how we, over time, look at, I think, provision of health services that are more responsive to the populations that we serve, and how we do that, because it's probably a bit odd in 2026 that we don't have a bit more flexibility around some of how that operating model works across health, social care, and lots of other services. And I know that lots of services are open 24/7, and lots of services are open beyond those core times, but we're definitely, I think, are potentially a bit slower to catch up with some of where society goes. I think sometimes public services can be sometimes a little bit behind the curve in catching up, like digital access, for example, and making best use of things like the NHS app probably aren't quite where they would be if we say we were a Tesco, and the speed that they probably moved in terms of setting up a club card and all that sort of stuff, as like a comparator. So I guess I have always had an interest in men's health from that perspective, but now it's, I suppose that's still referenced in terms of some of the biography stuff in terms of the public health work that I've done. But in particular, I guess in terms of my journey through public health in particular, it's just more a view of, I guess, inequality between the people in society, I guess the most affluent, the top 10, 20%, sort of usually get the most, have the easiest access to the most, and know how to navigate the system. And the people who suffer the most in terms of ill health, morbidity, poorer health outcomes tend to get the least. And in that gap between the haves and the have-nots is a lot of health burden that if we could close the gap, we would reduce significantly the pressure on health and social care services. So not only is it the right thing to do for the individuals in terms of improving their health and well-being, it also makes the most sense in terms of public funds and where you invest the money and where you see savings from that investment over time.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how that, or to hear how that passion's evolved as you've gone through the different roles and as you take on the different responsibilities. Going back to all of our different roles in life, Dean, I know that you have also taken on caring responsibilities. You helped care for your father during his illness. Would you tell us a little bit about that experience and how it impacted you?
Yeah. So my dad he got formally diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2022. And before that, we'd noticed sort of a cognitive decline that probably started or was noticeable probably from like 2018, 19. Then the COVID pandemic happened, and I came to talk to my mum sometimes on the phone, and she's saying, "Oh, your dad's acting a bit strangely." Never really picked up on it as much then, so we weren't having as much contact. It was quite a strained sort of time, particularly the job I was doing. So during COVID, I was director of public health, which had a whole bunch of challenges around it. And and then I think coming out of COVID, because seeing my dad was sort of different to how he had been. And then we had a downward trend for that 5-year period where my dad's sort of mental and physical health declined. In some ways, declines, it seemed to almost go quite slow, and over times it seemed like there were big drops in his in sort of his health and well-being, and his ability to look after himself, particularly for the last couple of years, really went downhill in terms of personal care needs and being able to live still at home. And my mum has always sort of prided herself on looking after people, whether it were myself and my brother growing up or her mum and dad, so my grandparents. So of course, I used to have my grandparents come around to our house as well. Quite often we looked after my grandparents on mum's side for quite some time. For when they are before both grandparents passed away. Both my dad's parents, my dad's dad died when he was 15, and my dad's mum passed away when I was only 4. Because my dad's was in his early 80s. He's quite a bit older than my mum. He was only in her late 60s. And so my mum was that main carer, and it was really myself, my brother, and our wives sort of stepping in and supporting my mum, and then in particular myself and my brother supporting my mum and dad and supporting some of the personal care over time, and trying to make sure that my dad could still live with my mum. My mum really didn't want to put my dad into any sort of care setting. We had some care support, but it was always sort of at set times that weren't always the most helpful for my mum. So again, it was how we tried to step around, I guess, as a family to do that, and that was really difficult. And it was really difficult in terms of not just my dad, but also my mum, and then I guess our own emotions, and then also having 2 young children. So it feels like you're a bit like the filling in a sandwich at times. It feels like you pull in all directions, which was challenging. And then my dad got really ill in August, and he'd been supported by our dementia palliative care nursing team for quite a while, and then community nursing team as well. And he got sent to A&E in early August. We managed to get him back home that same day. They were worried around a bowel obstruction, but we managed to sort of negotiate the hospital to get him home and get some laxatives and stuff. And then we spent about 2.5-3 weeks caring for my dad as he gradually went more and more downhill. So me and my brother practically moved in. And yeah, my dad went on a general downward spiral. We ended up with a syringe driver for a couple of weeks. And then my dad passed away on the end of August. 29th of August, 2025.
Really sorry for that loss, Dean. And were you there every day then doing the care for him? Was that a daily thing for you? I think you're geographically quite close to your parents, aren't you?
Yeah. So I've always lived not that far from my from my mum and dad. So for probably for a couple of years, it involved at various times. So sometimes it might be there for a couple of weeks. I might go around in the morning and help my mum and do that before work, and then my brother might do it in the evening, or I might alternate, and then it might improve for a little bit, so I might only do it a couple of times a week. And so that went on for a good spell, and then for that last sort of period of time, we more or less, as I say, just lived with mum and dad. The way it felt was during the school holidays, and our wives mainly on with us children and stuff, and so we're sort of mainly there, coming back and then going back again, because we were repeatedly told, we think your dad's maybe got 24, 48 hours. We think it'll be soon. And that was said, I think, from more or less the middle part of August. And from that, it ended up lasting another, I think, 15, 16 days. So it was always that bit of, we want to make sure we're there. Yeah. And then you live with that guilt as well. You want to be there. And you know that your mum's always there. And so you want to be there. But then also you know that your children aren't there, and there's all that other pressure there, and they're there, and they want to do stuff, and and that can be, so it was difficult, but I'm glad we were there.
Yeah, it's a really hard period of life, and that they are hard things to try and balance. I know there are quite a few people within our organisation who are trying to balance similar caring responsibilities. Do you have any advice that you would offer, or any words of support for people who are in a similar position?
Well, in terms of the caring stuff, I think it's really obvious. I think whatever you do, you beat yourself up. And so I think the first thing is try not to beat yourself up. But then even someone saying that, you're still going to do that. So you have that feeling of guilt. But there's also something about recognising that you're there and you're trying to do the best you can. And I guess then it's around also probably what I said first, that a job's a job, and work can be really good, and lots of people define themselves about the work they do and the role they have, but it is just a job. So there is also something around how we recognise that ourselves, and how we have those sorts of conversations with managers or managers with their direct reports or as colleagues, in terms of how can we support people in terms of meeting their caring needs. Because it might be that for a while, or for some people, your caring needs is a regular pattern, where for certain parts of a day or certain times in a week, you need to be somewhere else to do that, and that work can help keep you well. And if work can allow you to do that, then that can promote your overall health and well-being in really difficult circumstances. Is important. There also might be other times where, for a certain period of time, you can't do that because you needed to be in that caring role for a much more concentrated period because of what's happening. And I think it's also about recognising that and not trying then to be overly heroic in what you're trying to do, but also being recognised in terms of that conversation with your GP or with a health professional as and when you need it. Because I think as people are living longer, and people very often are living longer but in worse health for an amount of time at the end of life, that this is happening more. This is going to happen. So particularly there, but we've also, as is reported in the papers, we've got issues in terms of children and SEND and special educational needs and support at that end. So whichever end of the spectrum or in the middle of the spectrum in terms of impacts, is just recognising that the caring role for everyone is different, and I guess it's going to feel different. And it's being kind to yourself and making sure you've got support around you, and that support will look different for different people. But I think the most important thing is you've always got someone to talk to, and finding who's the right person for you. I think it's half the battle. And for me, it's always been more informal support rather than formal. But for other people, they might benefit more from formal support. I'm no expert.
A lot of lived experience. So, what kind of things do you do these days to look after your health and your well-being?
I try and take some form of regular exercise. So we decided to get a dog last year, which was a big decision after many years of saying we're definitely not getting a dog. Eventually,
great decision.
Yeah. And as much as I'd never tell anybody around home that we made the right decision, it was definitely the right decision. And so I guess I go out walking a lot more. I find being out helps. So it really makes you get your steps in, which is really good. So generally, I like doing sort of physical exercise, whether that's football, although not as much as I used to, so my knees aren't great. Bit of weightlifting, just sort of training. I've got quite a big setup in the garage in terms of some training equipment that I'll use, or go walking. Or I've sort of quite got into sort of rucking lately, which is just like a big backpack and just go walking, which you can do with a dog, and that's quite good. So find it gets the heart rate higher, and you're just outside.
Did you say rucking?
Yeah, rucking.
Never heard of that. So it's walking, but with a big rucksack on.
Yeah. So I never heard of it. Someone told me about it, and then I googled it, and then So you can get like. I started just doing it with a backpack, putting things in. Now I've got a backpack where you can put like these thin weights, and you slot them down the back. It's padded. You put that on. You can still put stuff in the backpack as well, and then you just go. You can just go walking. So you can like. If you've not got much time, you can take your dog for a walk, put your rucksack on. I think it burns something like 25% more calories than just walking without the rucksack, from what they estimate from some stuff that I read.
Okay.
So so just that sort of stuff.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So I used to be much more into like doing formal training and exercise. As I've got older, I've got much more into like just trying to fit stuff in. That I more enjoy rather than being more structured about it. Really.
I think with family commitments as well, it is what you can fit in around your lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes you feel better as well for doing some exercise, especially in these jobs where you end up being sat down quite a lot. I mean, to say I tried never to have to wear a suit and tie and not sit down too much. I've ended up in some jobs where you end up being sat down for quite a lot or driving around different sites and stuff. So you get some exercise when you're out in places, but you don't get that many steps in. So you need to try and fit it in somewhere. Yeah.
If you were to offer one piece of health advice, what would it be?
Health advice. You know what, right? I think I spent a lot of time beating myself up about stuff or thinking I wasn't good enough. So I suppose my one bit of advice would be just try and be a bit nice to yourself, kind to yourself, and just think that we're all imperfect people, aren't we? Trying to do the best we can. And I could spend a lot of time now in this job thinking I'm not doing as good as I could do, and I could do more, and I could do other stuff, and I should be doing more. But ultimately, you do the best you can with what you've got, and you try and make it work. And I think that's all we can all do. And I think if we can just do that and not beat ourselves up, that would be that'll be, I guess, my big thing. And then the other bit is just move a bit more. I think like anytime if you just not be sat down all day and you just move and get some fresh air. That's two bits though, isn't it? But there's one physical, one mental.
They are both really good pieces of advice. I did think you were going to say get a dog, but
yeah. Well, see, I might come to regret that though, because also like I don't know, the dog could end up costing you a lot, couldn't it, at some point in time as well? So
they genuinely do. They genuinely do. That's really, really good advice, and I really enjoyed our chat. Thank you very much, Dean, for your time.
Cheers. Thank you.